Welcome, everyone, to another podcast, another Microsoft Unboxed podcast. This is episode 49. I am your host today, Kareem Anderson. I'm joined by
David Allen. We're getting close to the half century, buddy. We're getting old.
very much so, very much so. If you couldn't tell by the grays, and for those of you listening, there's a lot of grays on the chin.
Yeah, I've got
Uh,
a few grays on my chin too, so I guess
yeah,
it's just age and wisdom. That's what
there
we're
we
gonna
go.
go with.
Let's just rename the podcast to Age and Wisdom. That should be it. Today, we are going to be talking a little bit about Microsoft, a lot about perception, essentially. Some of our stories today include the Copilot app landing on macOS. And just in time for that, I actually switched up my machines. I am using a Mac computer today just to try it out. I would give you my firsthand experience with it. That's all. Don't worry, I got a ThinkPad here to run the rest of my stuff on as well. We're going to be talking about Microsoft canceling some data centers, at least the leases for data centers, and a recalibration. We were talking about Office 365 being free with a few caveats. Satya Nadella was on a podcast at the beginning of this week, and he also wanted to reset expectations around AI and the belief of AIG. We're going to be talking about a new Photoshop app for iOS, and our old friend slash annoying nemesis Mark Benioff is at it again. Surprise, surprise, criticizing Microsoft. But this time around, I kind of agree with him, and I think a lot of people will probably agree as well, even Microsoft fans. And then we'll cap off with a farewell to Skype. We'll end the podcast on a somber note, and then we'll, obviously get into what we're going to be doing this weekend section. With that being said, let my co-host take it from here.
All right, let's kind of jump in here. Let's find us something interesting to talk about. And my OneNote just closed itself. So if you give me just a minute,
Beautiful. I'm going to
uh,
help him by stalling a little bit and kind of
yes, please.
guiding people into what we're going to be talking about, which is Copilot for macOS. Now, it's interesting. As I'm kind of filibustering here, that we are told about macOS being, the superior operating system to Windows and stuff like that. But I've come to find out that it doesn't have as many dedicated apps as the Microsoft Store does for things like TikTok, uh, Instagram, Reddit, things like Mac doesn't have any of those. They're relying on the web versions. They're relying on you to go to Safari, go to the desktop web app, and then make it an app on Mac OS. Similar as you would with Windows. A lot of the apps that are in Windows are, just the PWA versions of it, but they do come with, some of the Chrome taken off of the browser, a few additional features as far as integrating with the cameras, on your or the speakers, things like that give you a little more of the mobile experience. But I'm saying this all to say that Copilot on iOS is now a dedicated app. I think you previously had to you had to download Edge, use Edge, and then go to the side panel in order to do it. But I wanted to make note that we're always told the Microsoft Store, and at least I guess that was a perception. The Microsoft Store sucks, doesn't have the apps that you need. The apps that they do have
Yeah.
are garbage. Mac OS has even fewer, and yet it's heralded as this amazing operating system with this great first-class experience.
Well, that I'm gonna kind of segue us into this. That's something I noticed when I was a Mac user. I was a Mac user for about 10 years, and played the Mac ecosystem with the phone and the watch and the AirPods and whatnot. And that was always something that was frustrating to me when, the one thing I remember was the version of OneNote, to keep this Microsoft theme. The version of OneNote was always different. The OneNote version on the Mac was always 2 or 3 versions behind the OneNote version on Windows. It would be in the Apple Store, sitting over there by itself, not grouped with the rest of the Microsoft Office suite. And that was always irritating to me. I had to go find Word. I had to go find PowerPoint. I couldn't just go download Office. So, whatever magic they've got in the sauce over there, I hope they mix it a little better. But it looks like Microsoft has kind of embraced Apple, at least with AI. And I think that's something they're going to have to do. And I think everybody's going to have to do, because at the end of the day, these investors would like to be repaid for their millions of dollars of investments for AI. So what Microsoft did here was make Copilot available on Mac. Now, there are a few caveats to this. This is not something that is built in or integrated into the operating system. You do get a quick access with your keyboard shortcuts, option and space. You get the dedicated app provides a richer set of features, including image generation, text generation, and voice interactions. So you don't miss out on any of the candid features of Copilot. It also is specifically designed for macOS for a smooth, responsive interface. Now, what you're not seeing there is, of course, integration with Apple. That's kind of the part that you're not seeing.
We lost our co-host. Thanks, StreamYard. I'm sure he'll be back, but I will pick up the story from where he left off. As far as going over the features, we do see, again, it's optimized for macOS, which again they say designed specifically for macOS to ensure smooth and responsive experience. Its focus interface is very similar to what we get on Windows. It has offline capabilities, to basically provide offline functionality. I wrote this story up. I've again been trying out the app itself. It functions very similar to the one on Windows. So for those of you Windows users who are contemplating, you're not losing anything. It is still arguably the degraded version of Copilot that we got used to, at least on the Windows version. Who knows if they'll keep parity as far as features are concerned, but it offers much of the same functionality. Um, to the point of keyboard shortcuts, that's about as far as integrated as you get. You still get Copilot features and functionality that you can get in the Office apps that are dedicated. That's again the level of cohesion that you get. You also are still using, now keep this in mind, you're still using ChatGPT 4.0, I believe, in both models. You have Apple Intelligence, which leverages that when it needs to do more complicated things, and that's integrated, baked into the Copilot app, which gets to our next point of, if you're a Mac user who uses Copilot or uses ChatGPT or wants to use Apple Intelligence, fortunately, you can get in one machine, which is pretty awesome. But it will cut down the necessary extra step in Apple Intelligence. Usually you'll get Apple Intelligence or something, and it says, "Hey, would you like to drill a little deeper into it? Initiate ChatGPT or whatnot." With Copilot and ChatGPT, you already get those right out of the bat. I believe Think Deeper is also been built into this app as well. So you'll get that at the bottom of your prompt when Copilot is up and going. So it basically will leave it to you to kind of pick or figure out, which one you want to use. But again, if you're on macOS, that is the benefit. You get basically 3 access points to ChatGPT's latest model. Plus, you get a little flavor of Apple Intelligence if you're just looking for the surface level of AI things. I'm going to give it to my co-host, who's now back, to see what his thoughts are as far as Microsoft seeing this as a competitive measure. Like, hey, is this a way to keep people in Copilot? Is this a way to bring people over who are getting new machines from Apple to make sure that they stay with Copilot? Or do they just see this as, Apple Intelligence hasn't taken off, this is an opportunity for us? What do you think?
Well, I think you're kind of on point with a little bit of all of it. I think you're holding a Mac, you're using a Mac, but my experience with Macs over the last few months is Apple Intelligence is a little bit further behind Copilot and ChatGPT and Gemini. So this is a place for Microsoft to slide Copilot in there and say, look, here's a competitive choice. Here's a different choice. Here's a choice that does things that Apple Intelligence does not. And I think that's where it fits. And for me, that was always where something would fit. When Apple had a feature and Microsoft had a feature, and I was an Apple user, I would always, let Microsoft fill any gaps that Apple didn't have, or vice versa. But once I picked an app, like for example, if I'm using ChatGPT and Copilot, if I pick one or the other, I tend not to go back to the other one unless there's another gap that needs to be filled. So I think this is smart on Microsoft's part to jump in there, try to grab some of those Apple users, because at this point, I think every user for Microsoft and AI is important. And I think every user for, all of the others is important. So it wouldn't surprise me if we saw a Gemini app pop up. If you can get somebody to use that and get somebody to pay a subscription or use an existing subscription that they have on another device, which also may be Microsoft's play. If somebody has a Windows device and they've paid for Copilot Pro, if they can sign in to their Copilot Pro account on their Apple device, that's a win. It keeps them from going to Apple and paying Apple something later if they request it, and not dropping the Copilot subscription. So I see it as a win.
Yeah, it's definitely it's always a plus to have more options and more access, or make things more accessible, even when their functionality is still questionable, as we have been saying for months on end about AI. We're going to move to our next topic, which kind of segues into the functionality of AI and the future of AI, which is Microsoft canceling at least 2 data center leases. And this is according to a research note by TD Cohen. Microsoft has canceled at least 2 leases in the US for 2 private data center operators, which will be totaling a couple of hundred megawatts of what have been used as far as power to fuel Copilot AI, I'm assuming. I have my own conspiratorial reasons for this, and I'm going to get into those first before I give you the foundational ones, because what's not fun, then, we're going to start calling it, Tin Hat Fall Fridays, where I get to ramble on about things that probably aren't even true. But as far as this conspiracy theory, it's that Microsoft is seeing the writing on the wall that AI hasn't been returning the investment that it needs, and it's pulling back where it can, where it makes sense, and where it doesn't do the biggest amount of PR damage to them. Canceling these leases doesn't mean that they are not still buying or leasing the nuclear power plant. That's a big thing. If they cancel that, that's that's a big sign. For data centers they've already broken ground on, if they said stop doing that, that's a big sign. Canceling the leases, and we don't know the size of these. Again, a couple hundreds of megawatts sounds big, but again, these are leases, which means these are centers that were, potentially will recoup this business by going to somebody else. Who knows? Microsoft's kind of doing this again quietly to say, hey, we might have overshot our landing point for what we thought AI was going to be. What are your thoughts on this? And I'm going to get into the reality of what, at least what the TD Cohen analysts are saying.
I think there was a lot of jumping too quick. When I saw you post this, I kind of sat back and thought about this a minute, because we're now deeper into this AI life cycle, and that's what I'm going to call it. We're deeper into this AI life cycle than we were when these agreements first came out. And I think everybody thought the old bigger is better. We got to have the power, we got to have the cooling, we got to have the space, and we got to have it now, because AI is going to be this great thing. And I think we're struggling with 2 ends of the spectrum. AI, the reality is AI is not being adopted as quickly as Microsoft and others would like it to be. I think they're able to see the subscription numbers and see actually what money is coming in, and go, hey, this is not, the user base, and we're not growing as quickly as we expected. But at the same time, and I questioned this when we first started hearing about these data centers, there was absolutely no thought of efficiency back then. It was throw more power at it, throw those megawatts into it.
Intel. Intel.
Yeah. Intel. Spin that nuclear generator. Let's have a backup nuclear generator. But now we're starting to see that, Google has an efficient AI chip. Microsoft has talked about theirs. They talked about theirs last year at Build, with their data center rack they had on stage. And we're starting to see that AI can be more efficient. So were these ginormous, well-packed data centers what we need? I don't think so. I think it's what we thought we need or needed. And now that has changed into something that maybe we don't need all those megawatts. And that's good for our energy consumption and, good for renewability and all that good stuff. So maybe this isn't a bad thing overall. It's not, like you said, it's not like Microsoft or anybody has stopped and said AI is a failure. I think we're just retooling what we think we need to process these needs.
Yeah. Kind of chiseling down my conspiracy theory. Again, the analyst at TD Cowen point out that Microsoft renegotiated its deal with OpenAI to allow OpenAI to leverage other data centers to kind of train their models. So this could be, part of that, saying, hey, we don't need to necessarily, fund the data center operations as much as we used to for OpenAI to still continue to be our partner and create very powerful AI tools. They're going to go somewhere else. And so if they're going to go somewhere else, let's cut out this. Let's let them kind of carry some of that load. In addition to that, I believe we will keep saying this DeepSeek, while it may not be the best, most secure AI out there, it did manage to show up and shave off $1 trillion in the industry as far as people spending. And so I think to that point, OpenAI, Microsoft, they're all kind of, being forced to early on find the efficiencies. Maybe they had planned to, like, hey, we're going to start off big, cast a wide net, do as much as we can. And then as we start to see the dollars and cents roll in, figure out efficiencies to maximize profit. We spent a ton of money. And, again, I think OpenAI said that they got, I think I forget the total number, hundreds of millions of users using ChatGPT. And I think they even have, millions as far as subscribers are concerned. So they're seeing usage. There is data to say, hey, the market isn't shrinking for them. It isn't like they went from, 400 million free users to 100 million paid users. I think they're somewhere in the middle of that. So they're seeing, that usage. And again, companies are going to want to offset their, layoffs, unfortunately, downsizing with AI. And so that's still going to be a market for them. Microsoft's still in the market for that. But now they're being forced to early on, 3.5 years in, 4 years in, to say, all right, now we got to actually start optimizing, finding those efficiencies early on. And this will go into another story that we'll talk about later, but that's the last note I'll put on that and belabor that point. Now we're going to move on to Office 365. What do you got for us?
Well, this kind of fell under the radar here. Office 365 has been a paid product for a couple decades now, at least, where in order to use it, you had to sign in. But I want to make sure I say this right. B-Bomb, that's how I'm going to say it, bbomb.com uncovered this week that there is actually a free version of Microsoft Office out there. And when you are prompted to sign in to your Microsoft account when you're installing this, if you look to the bottom left, you can actually skip that and it does not close the app. So what gets interesting is you can use Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. You are going to get some ads in the bottom right-hand corner, so you're going to have to deal with ads. The other caveat is you're going to need to be saving to a OneDrive account. You absolutely cannot do local saving. It has to be within the Microsoft ecosystem. It has to be saved to OneDrive. Some of your Excel formulas are a little bit limited. You're looking at just a basic spreadsheet if that's what you're needing to use it for. But, I don't think this is a bad idea because Microsoft is able to recoup some of that investment with the ads that they're running in the bottom right-hand corner. And I think for most people, you might be able to make this work for homework, for recipes, for jotting down a resume, for taking, basic notes, for phone calls or whatever, it is that you do on your daily, maybe, typing up a YouTube script, typing up a podcast script. I think this is a good idea. I understand why Microsoft hasn't, popped it up front page. Hey, use Office for free, because that $99 subscription that they just took from $69 to $99 to help pay for AI would mean a lot less, because ultimately, I'm going to say probably a good 80% of people could get away with what the free version is up to. And nobody ever said, I tried this. You do have to save to the OneDrive account. Open the OneDrive folder and pull it out on your local desktop.
Whoa. You're trying to get this podcast shut down? Come on, buddy.
So there are workarounds for, the save to OneDrive requirement.
Yeah, it's just an extra step of save to desktop. It's pretty easy. But again, it's for your benefit to have it in two spots anyway. Always have, a local copy just in case, and vice versa. If you're traveling, your computer gets wrecked, whatever, it's good to have a copy in the cloud. With that being said, I mean, because I got no objections to this. This is a good, positive story with, a relatively small inconvenience and on the Microsoft side. So good on Microsoft for offering it, bad on them for not promoting it, I suppose, but good on us for promoting it and getting people to use it if they need to, because being organized and productive and these days for as few dollars as possible is always a benefit. With that being said, I'm going to move on to Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella was on a podcast, I believe, this past weekend. The news broke Sunday nightish, Monday morning, about, and it was a long podcast. It was a very insightful one. But he's basically trying to, and this is what I'm saying, this is what I'm surmising, reset the conversation on AI. And again, this comes amid the restructuring of the deal with OpenAI, Microsoft's embrace of DeepSeek, ironically, DeepSeek's presence in AI in general, as far as being low cost and efficient. This also comes into talks about Microsoft's, earnings going forward, what they determine as their benchmarks. Revenue is always good. Revenue helps move the market for investors. Profit's even better. But when you are questionable on those two things, revenue and profit, what do you start to do? You start to create an ambiguous, ambivalent forecasting. You start to say, hey, we are no longer moving towards this hard, steadfast goal. We're moving towards a more open one that can be interpreted. And what is his version of that? He's moving from the conversation from AIG, which is kind of being the goal for most companies to have this, assistant that basically does a lot of the automated stuff already on its own, unprompted, to a new definition, which is economic growth. In this podcast, I believe the podcast was Dwarkish podcast, I believe, Dwarkesh. I apologize if I said that incorrectly. But on that podcast, he goes over a myriad of things, a bunch of stuff. But the ones that we kind of settle on talking about this one is that he's moving to a 10% economic growth benchmark, moving away from the conversation of AIG, of your Copilot being automating itself to do things on your behalf, which again, they're still working towards that. But he thinks that the economic growth marker, meaning, seeing a rise in its usage, a rise in the revenue it's bringing back companies, and which will raise the boat on everything. And that's going to be where they can say, hey, AI has reached its full potential. It's a strategic move by Microsoft, in my opinion, because again, it takes the conversation off of pure dollars and cents to a more long-term, like, hey, now we can start to see the increases across the board. And until we do, we're not where we need to be, which kind of, puts off the investors who are saying, hey, next year you need to have returned $5 billion. Now it's like, hey, when we see all companies start to improve, that's when we can say that now we're finally where we need to. So keep investing until we get there. It also they also talk about, the quantum computing breakthrough that they have, which again is more along the lines of how they're going to reach AIG eventually. Uh, I think everyone's kind of skeptical about, Nadella's pivot on this, but he's going to keep doing it. And, if we have learned nothing from our current president, repetition becomes reality. So you keep saying it. Eventually people will start to, kind of bend towards that premise on it. What are your thoughts on moving from AIG and AI specific markers to a more broader economic conversation about AI?
I think that's what he had to do. And I think that's what, the Googles and the others are going to have to do, because I think all this stems from AI. And we've sort of touched on this before. AI is a very broad topic. AI to you means one thing. AI to me means another thing. AI to the homemaker means something else. And some people don't even know what AI is and don't care to. They're still going to go to google.com or bing.com, and they're going to look up whatever they need, and they're going to carry on. And I think it goes back to some of this. We don't have yet that one whiz bang feature that says I need to go be a Copilot subscriber so Microsoft gets that money. But if they tone down the free version of Copilot too far, then they just pushed everybody back to the search engine, I think. And AI kind of fades away. So what they were hoping for was that quick, people would see the use, see the need, and they would be throwing that credit card down for those Copilot Pro subscriptions. But I think in my day-to-day, consumers are still asking, what do I need AI for? So now that the narrative has changed, and like you said, we have stretched it out, we're going to see services taking advantage of AI, and then services taking advantage of, hey, you can do this with AI with our service. Okay, that customer subscribes to that service, and money is funneled in that way. So when you start getting a bigger pot of money coming in from different directions, he's able to spread that out and say, look, when everybody starts building their, for lack of a better term, plugins, let's call them that, plugins for AI, plugins to these ecosystems, that's what we're waiting on. Now, have this discussion with him a year from now or 2 years from now, when those plugins may or may not be there. You may get a different conversation if they're not there. I think it would be more of a pessimistic conversation at that point. I think this is I don't want to call it a stall point. This is the change of direction to see what developers and companies are going to do with AI to produce that needed revenue.
Well, I also think it's going to be a quicker way for them to kind of obfuscate the conversation from consumer AI and commercial AI. Because when you say economic growth, it's the consumer aspect of economic growth is relatively small. Like you and I are not going to be able to at least showcase how we used AI to make money that help push the economy forward. Unless, this podcast takes off. Hope it does, everybody. Then we could say, hey, we used it to write our show notes, and this is what led to us getting an increase in our viewer count, which led to an increase into our ad revenue, which led to us making a whole business out of this that we can now employ people to kind of run the podcast and production and stuff like that. That's when we can start to say, hey, AI can contribute to that. But that's a lot of steps for a consumer to use. But if you're a business and you're already offering your numbers every quarter, every earnings call to say, hey, our revenue is at this amount. We incorporated AI and now our revenue is at this amount. It's easy for Microsoft to say, hey, see, that's what AI is doing. Versus like, hey, what did it do for you today, David? I don't know. I typed up some things. I had it spell check some stuff for me. I brainstormed with it a little bit. Do you really need it? No, but it saved me an hour or two. Versus hardcore revenue was here. Revenue, in the quarter, we also added AI. Not saying that it attribute, we can't say directly, but we did do it. Microsoft can now point to it and say, hey, that bump right there, that's got to be part of AI. And now look at your numbers. And it's easy for them to kind of do that.
And two, you have to remember, to your point, these companies have developers basically on standby at this point. So if, they can go hire somebody from, say, Upwork, for example. And, Microsoft and Gemini and ChatGPT, they publish these APIs. So if a CEO or somebody in sales sees something and says, we need to plug AI into this now, and we can drastically change our workflow or, drastically change our bottom line, somebody sends an email and a developer's right on top of that. Okay, once one company does that, people talk. Mm-hmm. Another company does that. And then the other company hires another developer that adds another step to this process and another step to this process. So I think Satya Nadella's hope is, podcast me again in a year and let's see what AI has helped build. And he will show with some of these pie graphs and some of these bar graphs and go, look, we moved this company $10 million. We moved this company $5 million, $25 million. Look at what AI can do. And I think that's where we stay.
Totally agree. Speaking of AI, we got Photoshop on iOS now, or at least a new version of that. You want to go into some details on that?
Yeah, we are a Windows podcast, or a predominantly Windows Microsoft podcast. But, when I see popular items that I know people use every day get large updates, I try to jump in and cover these. And I think this is a good one. We've always had the old Photoshop elements, that was basically, I always called it Microsoft Paint on steroids, to tell you the truth. Now we have a brand new version of Photoshop for iPhone, and I think it's available for iPad, even though it was not explicitly mentioned. I do believe it's available for iPad. Closer to the desktop counterpart, we've got 20,000 fonts are available right out of the box. It is $7.99 a month or $69.99 a year, which is a Photoshop plan by itself with Adobe. If you remember, Adobe has the Creative Cloud. So if you just want the Photoshop, $7.99 a month, $69.99 a year, you have multiple layers. You have the ability to do camera raw filtering. You have quick actions, which is an Apple thing with the button that's on the right-hand side. You have some, speaking of AI, you have some generative AI options now built into the Apple device. And you can grab this from the Apple App Store and kind of check it out. A family member of mine does have an iPhone. I did download it on their phone and tinker with it. We're getting a little closer to the desktop style app. Layers work really well. That was something that they mentioned in their press release. It does feel more touch-oriented. The generative AI worked really well. I was actually surprised at what that would produce for you. But, we have to remember, people are creating basically where they stand these days, or, where they sit. They're not you're not always hauling your content back on an SD card to dump it on a PC or to dump it on a high-end editing machine to post your content. A lot of people, especially the TikTokers out there, are producing their content on their device, on their phone, because that's where the app is, meant to be, and that's where it's easiest to use. You do get speaking of PC, you do get the web version as part of this as well, and that's actually pretty decent. Loads up like a website. It's kind of a app-based type thing to where you can do basic edits right from your browser. So we do not have the ARM native Yes, I'm complaining. We do not have the ARM native Adobe suite yet, but hey, at least our iOS friends get something a little more enhanced for their Apple devices.
But wait, there's an Android version coming later this year. So
Yes, I did. I did leave that out. There is an Android version coming later this year. There is no date on that Android version yet. So us
yeah,
Android
later this
users
year.
that like that Windows integration, we just have to wait a little longer.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's cool. To your point, I wonder if Adobe's feeling any heat as far as or pressure, considering apps like Canva and CapCut, which are mobile intuitive, mobile first designs that are being used by lots of people who create content for social media platforms. Now, again, not for your dedicated YouTube channels, which some still are, but if you're someone who is creating content that doesn't have to be professionally done, doesn't have to be shot with a raw camera. We're not talking about 4K. We're just talking about people who are educating others via TikTok. They get themselves in front of a camera real quick and then they put up a background with information behind it. That stuff's all being edited and done on the device, like you said, standing in maybe in line at a restaurant or at a store or wherever the information is being captured at the moment. And it's being done with apps like CapCut and Canva on people's phones. So I wonder if, obviously this thing was in development for a while, but I wonder if they're going to do the consideration of making this a touch first, easily accessible and intuitive version of Photoshop, or if they're just adding more features for people who are going to do more sit down content creative stuff for like the iPad per se. So whenever I can get a chance to try it out, I will come back to you guys with my thoughts on it. With that being said, we're going to move on to our next story, which is our old friend Mark Benioff is still yammering about Microsoft. He sounds like a jilted ex-lover because every week it's Microsoft is doing this wrong, Microsoft is doing that wrong, Microsoft, I hate. But I am on his side this time around. What he's talking about, yeah, I know. I have gone to the dark side, the Benioff side. Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff won't shut up about Microsoft, but again, he's talking about I think they just had their recent investors call as well, and they are doing relatively well. I say relatively in comparison to the bigger players, but they're doing relatively well with their implementation of AI for their again. Salesforce is mostly CRM providing a software company, but they are doing a very slow, methodic, small release of AI. But they're saying that in light of some recent changes, and we just kind of highlighted them at the beginning of this podcast, the shuttering of leases, the renegotiation with the OpenAI, the conversation switch from goals of AIG to economic growth, that he's saying Microsoft was spending too much money. He's been saying it. He's saying that they were maybe too big and that they were rudderless, they were directionless. And he's proven that by saying, when Salesforce mentioned agents, Microsoft was quick to pivot towards agents. Now, I would say that Microsoft's agents are more useful because they span various productivity offerings, while again Salesforce is mostly CRM. But Salesforce was amongst the first companies to start talking about agents in general, and Microsoft pivoted towards it, and I think is successfully implementing it. But he's been right at least on that, and I think he's right on Microsoft over investing. And Microsoft isn't the only one that he goes after. It's just his flavor du jour because he has a long-standing beat. But he goes after Meta. He goes after Google. A lot of these companies. I don't think he goes after X necessarily, but we'll see if he considers them even a player in the market going into the future. But I think he's saying from a strategic foresight aspect of it, Microsoft again may have overinvested. Doesn't mean that it's going to bring the company down. They're not going to crumble. But considering how much money they spent on Windows Phone, it makes us wonder: are they going down that same path just with a bigger wallet? What are your thoughts on Benioff saying, "Hey, I told you guys, you're spending way too much money. Now you're making moves to kind of back up what I just said"?
He's not wrong. I don't think he's wrong on this one. I have disagreed with him on a few things and a few things we have discussed on this podcast, but I'm questioning. I'm going to look at this two ways. If Microsoft doesn't And let's include the Googles and the Metas in this discussion too. If Microsoft does not invest what they have invested in Microsoft in AI, where does AI sit? Do we know what AI is? Or are we still going to google.com oblivious of what else we can do? Because remember, AI didn't just come out of the woodwork here. It's been under development and under testing, and it was made public, and these companies saw it. This is the next greatest thing. Get me those 5-gallon buckets of money and start pouring them in as quickly as possible. This is what people are going to do. And I feel like if the money's not invested, people don't know. And I think these companies have continued to invest money with no checks and balances there, to his point, to say, hey, look at what you've invested. What have you gotten back? No, invest more. Invest more. And I think we have reached that point to our story a couple of stories ago. The narrative of AI is changing. That money is spent. You're going to spend more money to change the message. You don't do that for free. So you're going to spend more. Hopefully it's less than what you've already spent. But I think you're going to play the long-term game, to Satya Nadella's point, to recoup that back. And Mark is absolutely right. Too many companies poured too many buckets of money in AI before we knew what its capabilities might be. And we assumed that people were going to jump all over it, and we would have already recouped this money, and investors are happy, and everything on the stock board is green. It's not. That's the reality. It's not. That's why Sasha is out having to do these podcasts. Hey, we understand that everything is not green. They're not going to say this is not what we expected. They're going to say, let me stretch this for you to a bigger vision and see if you buy that. So, Mark, I have disagreed with some of the things you have said. I'm going to give you credit for this one. I think you are correct. Too much, too fast.
I have disagreed with most things he said, but to your point, I will also give him credit. Admittedly, for people who are grabbing pitchforks and tar and feather for us, Mark is sitting from a privileged position. Salesforce isn't known as the AI company, and they're not as big as Microsoft. They don't need to necessarily invest to get a return on their implementation of AI. So he's okay to kind of sit back and nitpick and kind of armchair quarterback as the bigger companies fuel this industry that he can kind of grift off of or glide off of. But again, it is questionable that Microsoft has committed $80 billion to this with, as we've been saying for months, no clear-cut winner as far as AI is concerned. And again, Microsoft's not the only one. Google's doing it. They were just doing it, in-house. Meta's doing it. They're also doing it somewhat in-house. We know the expenditures that Grok has acquired is on the X side as well. Every company's dipping their toes in AI to varying degrees. Microsoft just seems to be the biggest, loudest, and the ones out first. And to your point of being a long tail thing, again, this is all the investment that needs to help fuel the industry. And Microsoft's also working on small language models, which are kind of what in the vein of what Salesforce is doing. They just start off with them, but Microsoft helped power the larger ones in order to chisel down to the small ones to find the efficacies and the optimizations to then probably pivot to their own. Say, hey, from this point on, the data centers that we now own, we built from the ground up, we invested, we have a ton of them around the world. Those are ours, now powering our smaller language models. We don't need to lease anything. We don't need to deal with anybody. We don't need to make partnerships anymore. People are coming to us for these things. That's just money that's pouring back into us. It's just going to take a lot longer than we had anticipated or planned because the technology was unknown. I
actually want to put this out there to our viewers. If for the viewers that watch or the viewers that listen, I want to know. You mentioned Gronk, you mentioned Meta. We talk about Copilot, Gemini all the time. Who actually out there listening or watching has used these services and known that that's what you're using, and what did you use them for? Because when I look at my daily habits, you search something on Facebook, it says powered by Meta AI there in the search box or something to that effect.
Mhm.
You search something on Google or Bing, you get that AI response before your search results. Okay, that's kind of built into the traditional way that we do things. Gronk, I've seen the icon on X, never touched it. So my question is, of our users out there, who is using AI, knows you're using AI, and what are you doing with it?
And if it's illegal, don't tell us. We need plausible
Exactly.
deniability. Last story is Microsoft is saying goodbye to Skype, which means that we're all saying goodbye to Skype inadvertently. And
Oh
this is
no.
just this is news I believe that came in late last night. We wrote it up this morning on the website. Let me get you the details real quick. I just want to make sure that I am accurate in saying, yeah, as of I believe May this year, uh, Microsoft is suggesting people transition to Teams if you're going to still be using online chat functionality for Microsoft because Skype is now going to be done. It was founded in 2003. It was acquired by Microsoft, I believe, after was it eBay or some other random company bought it. Microsoft picked it up in 2011 for $8.5 billion. Uh, it had its bump right around that time. People were definitely using it, and especially as we were making use of more and lightweight laptops, people were using it to communicate internationally because it was just a great client. But Microsoft was very hands-offish, perhaps in light of uh, earlier antitrust issues, and that might have led to its downfall, ultimately speaking, because Microsoft was never really able to integrate it or wrangle it into its larger portfolio of productivity apps. So it kind of ran on its own development path. It didn't include a lot of the new features Microsoft. It didn't have a lot of the branding. It didn't have a lot of the marketing. And eventually, we got cell phones that were able to do FaceTime, and we started moving to WhatsApp and Messenger and things like that. And eventually, teams just couldn't keep up. It didn't have a lot of the social cachet to be associated with it. It was just kind of a business thing, and businesses started doing their communications on different platforms. Then we had COVID. COVID supercharged Zoom and some other aspects, which led to Microsoft pivoting towards Teams. Teams kicked off and picked up during COVID as well, which like I said, ultimately led to the demise of Skype. Microsoft saying, "Hey, we don't need this product anymore because we have Teams." Again, and this is all part of their communications when they say users move over from Skype to Teams. Now, I don't know the details just yet. If you want to go to the website, you can go see if they're there. I don't think they published these just yet about people who have Skype minutes or who have a Skype number, how any of that's going to transition over. But again, we have, what is this, February, March, April. We got about 2.5, 3 months. And who knows, Microsoft might make an extension and give us the rest of this year. But to figure out how those specific details are going if you're a heavy Skype user. What are your thoughts on Skype saying bye-bye?
I'm sad, buddy. I mean, for me and you at this age, we were Skype before Skype was Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
And Skype, the branding has always been very consumerish. It's always been the fun app, the fun communication app. I mean, I remember talking from college to home and, helping my international friends that were in college use Skype to talk to their friends and family back home. And, the camera integration was simplistic. You could easily pop up a video chat there with your friends. I mean, I have video gamed on Skype while talking to friends. And I get it. You can only have so many clients that do this type of thing. As you mentioned, Zoom, Microsoft, all good things must come to an end. I guess, but the branding of Teams for those Skype users, if there's enough Skype users out there to justify moving to Teams. I don't know how many people use Skype every day because we have so many options with Facebook Messenger, with WhatsApp, with, a lot of people just Instagram. A lot of people use Snapchat. When you look at people's profiles, you don't see contact me on Skype anymore. You just don't see it. So for the users that are left, Teams is probably the right answer. I don't think, there'll be any type of consumerish feel to this. I think it's just a matter of they've looked at the numbers, they've looked at the activity, they've looked at the cost, and said it's time.
Mm-hmm.
So something else from our technological young adulthood is moving away.
I know they took AIM from us. Now they're taking Skype. What else will they take from us? At its height, Skype, I think, was at, it touted 350 million users. It said at the number for years. I'm sure that number has gone down since then. Just a few details for those out there. I had mentioned that about the paid versions. Quote, Microsoft is moving forward, will no longer offer paid Skype features to new customers, including Skype credit and subscriptions that allow you to make and receive international and domestic calls. Current Skype subscriptions users can continue to use their Skype credits and subscriptions until the end of their next renewal period. Skype credit users can also continue to use the remaining Skype credits. After May 5th, 2025, the Skype dial pad will be available to remaining paid users from the Skype web portal and within Teams. So you'll still be able to do that. They're also going to let you export your Skype data over to Teams, which should be easy and hopefully relatively easy to make sure you bring all your contacts over, and hopefully you can tell your contacts to do the same. I don't know international rules when it comes to Teams, but we will apparently handle that in the coming months. That is our last story for today. What are you going to be getting into this weekend as far as gaming or entertainment or just in general?
Well, I think there's going to be some entertainment on my plate this weekend. I mentioned it a little bit last weekend. I actually had a chance to play it for a few minutes over the weekend. I got into the Delta Force solo solo campaign model last weekend. That was pretty good, and I've kind of been on an NBA basketball kick here for a little while. I've always kind of paid attention to the Lakers ever since Michael Jordan retired from the Chicago Bulls. I was the guy. I was the Jordan fan. I had the Jordan poster. I had the Horace Grant poster, and I think I had a Dennis Rodman poster in a Bulls uniform back in the day. And they picked up Luka on a trade a couple weeks ago now, and there's kind of some of that old basketball feel with the Lakers, with LeBron and Luka out there doing their thing. And I actually last night turned on NBA 2K25 to see if it had updated the Lakers roster, and the new roster is there. And what did I do as a result? I had to go in there and try it out, see what I could do with the combo. So I will probably do that again. If anybody's out there wanting to, kick my behind because I don't play it every day, and I've played it probably 5 times the entire season, come on. If you want some, LeBron and Luka will go get you.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's no shame in being a Jordan fan. I think we were all Jordan fans. I don't know if we were necessarily a Bulls fan. And I think unless you were like a Knicks fan back in the day, I think everyone had an affinity for their team plus Jordan and the Bulls. I was amongst those, being even a Laker fan. It's cool. It's interesting to know. I got a chance to play Marvel Rivals again. I think Thing is my new favorite player because I use these tank type characters. He's not necessarily a tank character, but for those of you who play the game, but he is a good in between. I think this weekend though, I will be trying Boulder Gate. Is it Boulder Gate? I believe.
Yeah, there is a Boulder Gate.
I think the third one's available. A friend of mine just texted and was like, "Hey, we should do some cross-platform playing." So I'm going to be exploring that. I'm also going to be watching probably a few shows. Actually, been watching that animated show Invincible. It's been amazing this season so far. So I got to watch yesterday's episode. I am also watching Castlevania Nocturne, I believe. That's like the sequel to the Castlevania show on Netflix. That is also amazing. Great animation that Netflix has in their in-house thing as well. And Reacher, another Amazon show. I believe that season just
I've
came out.
seen Reacher.
They're on season 3. I want to check it out, so I'll be watching that as well. Um, yeah, I'll be doing a lot of watching, a little bit of playing. And if you're again playing Boulder Gate 3 or whatnot, you can probably find. Where can people find you online if they want to reach out to you and say, "Hey, I want to talk to you. I want to play with you. I want to interact with you via the interwebs"?
Yes, please do. David PAJ 1978. That is over on Blue Sky. I do get involved with the video game discussions over there. There's some people that play some cool stuff over there. There's even some people that's got some cool setups over there, and that's kind of something I'm working on for us. If I was to take the background down, there's a little bit of a mess behind me, but I bet, and you guys are welcome to leave a comment while we're on the topic. I have thought about doing a what's on my desk type thing, just to give you an idea of what I do in the daily workflow and the things that I'm using. I got a little bit of Google, a whole lot of Microsoft, a whole lot of Lenovo, and thanks to my buddy here, the Samsung ecosystem is fully here and fully activated. So we'll see where that takes us.
Yeah, you can find me at Happy Hulk on Blue Sky. That is where I'm at most of the time, talking about politics and comics and anything else that's pop culture like. I am no longer on X/Twitter. I don't really post very much on Instagram, but I do visit Threads again to talk a lot more about comics and boxing routines. I've gotten into boxing as part of a supplement to my workout, so a lot of boxing talk on Threads as well. Other than that, you could probably run into me somewhere in Florida this weekend. Say hi. Go touch grass and see each other in person is also a good way to communicate and hang out. Hope you guys enjoy your weekend. Hope we were entertaining and educational. And we'll see you guys again next week with more Microsoft news.
Have a good weekend, folks.
With your tech and startup dreams, windows open possibilities. Saxophone plays out our routines. From PowerPoint to teams we call, connections